me turn my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course. And man, I am feeling incredibly inspired right now, and I was kind of like reflecting on what I want to talk about on today's show, and I was really struck by the Super Bowl halftime performance. And I want to preface today's conversation, as I always sort of say in these moments, you don't have to care about the actual subject matter to get the message that I'm conveying, right? The subject matter is simply the vehicle, right, to convey a message. So you don't have to like sports, you don't have to like Kendrick Lamar as an artist, whatever. You don't have to be a fan of music to get what I'm going to talk about today. But I was really struck by this performance because to me it was somebody who was sort of faced almost with two roads they could have gone down, but chose the road that maybe would be slightly less of a nod to their ego or slightly less of a pat on the back, and sort of stuck to their guns and presented themselves as authentically as possible, regardless of the platform they were performing on. And that's what Kendrick Lamar did with this halftime show. And I think I want to dive into that idea, right? You know, anybody who's listened to me or followed my content, you know I'm big on authenticity. And I think at its core, this show, the idea of like living in the gray area and this otherness and, you know, yearning for your place in this world and community, I think it all boils down to us sort of wanting to find the place that we fit in, but in a larger sense of it all, being able to, you know, to show up as our authentic selves and be accepted and have a place where we can feel accepted for who we truly are. And that is sort of, I think, what I took away in watching this performance that I thought was incredibly special and I think incredibly inspiring. And I think there's something that we can all sort of take with us for, you know, the various moves that we are making throughout the course of our lives and in our everyday, you know, movements throughout this world. And I don't want to like oversell. I think you get the idea of what we're talking about today. I kind of just want to dive into what I'm talking about today. So let's without further ado, let's just get to what I think is the takeaway that many of us can relate to and what we can apply to our lives from this performance. So we'll just do a deep dive in a segment called For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the back. Say it louder for the people in the back.
So I was kind of struck by expounding upon this to a degree because I had posted on my Instagram story after the performance, and I got like a lot of people sort of saying like, oh, I'm kind of confused by your take, or I'm surprised by your take. Because what I said was great performance if this was an award show or a concert. As far as Super Bowl halftime performances go, it was a little bit underwhelming. But with that said, an amazing moment for the culture. And I think that there was some confusion there because, you know, obviously there was a lot of people who were like, oh, worst Super Bowl ever. And like, you know, they happened to be falling under the umbrella of Trump supporters. Actually, I think Donald Trump even came out saying worst Super Bowl performance ever. And at this point, if Donald Trump hates you, it's probably a compliment. But I wanted to expound upon kind of what I meant by that. And actually, I think what made the performance so great was the fact that it wasn't a great Super Bowl halftime performance. And what I mean by that is the platform of the Super Bowl is one that is universal, right? There's a universality to the Super Bowl. It doesn't matter if you are a hate-mongering, bigot who believes in white nationalism, or you are Dr. Umar's biggest fan. everybody sort of convenes together for the most part and watches the Super Bowl, right? It's a day that even if you're not a sports fan, your TV is tuned to this game. And that's what makes the stage, the halftime performance, such a difficult platform, because it's supposed to appeal to a very diverse and conflicting audience, right? And the people who have had success, or the people who are considered as like the greatest of all time as far as the conversation of what's the greatest Super Bowl halftime performance, there are people like Michael Jackson or Prince or Beyonce, Bruno Mars. These are people whose catalog reaches far beyond any demographic, right? Be it generationally, be it race-wise, be it genre. They are just people who appeal to everybody for the most part, right? Obviously, you're never going to make everybody happy. But someone like a Kendrick Lamar has a incredible catalog, is a top-tier generational talent, generational defining artist, right? But he is also not somebody who has that catalog of universality, right? And I think when I say that, people think I'm taking a dig at Kendrick. And it's actually quite the opposite. Kendrick is not meant to be a great Super Bowl halftime performer, because if he was, he would be a watered down version of himself, right? And I'm not taking digs at any of these other great artists, but when you create music that is universally appealing, even if it's just a few songs, you are essentially watering down the honesty of you as an artist, and you are crafting something very intentionally meant to sort of be this pop crossover thing that everybody sort of hums and sings along to, right? And they are records that we enjoy and we love them, but they also are oftentimes songs or music that lack depth, right? And they are not something that defines a movement almost, right? Or a way of thinking. They're just sort of like the fun, mindless entertainment that we watch on TV, right? And they have their place in this world. But someone like a Kendrick has been very intentional with the music that he creates, and he's not somebody who's dropping music every year like many artists do. He's not somebody who's chasing radio singles. He is very intentional about how he presents his art at the end of the day. And that's what makes him so incredibly special. And that's what makes him great. And that's what has made him an artist that people absolutely love. But that's also what has made him sort of the antithesis to someone like a Drake, right? Because Kendrick has shown us who he is, what he believes, and what he stands for. And he's been, for the most part, very much sort of 10 toes down on who he is and doesn't stray regardless of the platform or chasing a certain accolade. Whereas a Drake, great artist, but the criticism is we don't really know who Drake is. He is sort of this chameleon who navigates in all different types of, genres and generations and has been incredibly successful in producing hits, but many would argue his catalog lacks depth, right? That truly connects with people in a way that is inspiring or, defines a culture. And I think Kendrick is never set up to be a great Super Bowl halftime performer, because that would mean he's essentially somebody who's watered down his art. And that's sort of what I've been trying to get at with this conversation. Kendrick is a true artist, and platforms like the Super Bowl halftime are not meant for true artistry. They are meant for sort of the watered down, make everybody happy type of performance. And again, not taking anything away from other people, but others have sort of towed this line, or I wouldn't even say towed this line, because you have these greats like Michael Jackson and Beyonce, and their music 110% means something to the culture, to the community. But they have sort of primarily focused in the past on producing hits, right? Following a formula, if you will, to creating great pop music. And that's not to take anything away from them, to say that they're not valid as a great artist. But for Kendrick, his goal has always been, I'm going to produce great music, but more importantly, my music is going to have a message, and everything from the rollout to the topics to the ad-libs, everything is cohesively supposed to sort of tell a much deeper story than just putting out a fire record. And what Kendrick did with this performance was he did an amazing Kendrick Lamar, like top tier, Mount Rushmore of Kendrick Lamar performances was done on this stage, and it was great. But it wasn't a great Super Bowl performance, because great Super Bowl performances often lack authenticity, often lack depth. Right? They are artists playing their biggest hits with a ton of different guests, and it's all the bells and whistles sort of meant to give you like that sugary rush rather than give you anything of meaning. And again, that's what the platform is meant for, right? It's meant to sort of be this this moment where the world sort of comes together and just mindlessly enjoys these few hours of entertainment. What Kendrick did is give you the most unapologetic Kendrick Lamar performance he possibly could. He gave people the thing that they love about Kendrick Lamar, right? And as a result, there are going to be a lot of people turned off by that, or as a result, he's not going to deliver what traditionally is expected of a Super Bowl performance. And you could argue that's what made it great. But what I'm saying with this entire conversation is Kendrick used this platform in a way that I think many people would have been scared to do. Because I think you have two routes you could take when it comes to something like this, right? You can either say, hey, I know what the people want. I'm going to give them this polished up, my biggest records I possibly can. I'm going to bring out a ton of different guests, and I'm going to just try to make this as entertaining as humanly possible, just for entertainment's sake, because that's sort of what the stage traditionally calls for. And on the other side of it, the decision you can make is, I'm going to use this platform, which normally would not be given to people like myself, or would normally be I would normally be expected to play it safe in a platform like this, and I'm going to show the world the most authentic version of myself, knowing that there are going to be a tremendous amount of people who don't get it, and knowing that it's probably not going to meet the same sort of standards of general entertainment as what's considered to be some of the great performances. And what I would argue is that Kendrick made the more difficult decision and made the more honorable one, and this is why he cemented his legacy as a great artist, because he decided to just be unapologetically Kendrick. And that's not easy to do on this sort of stage. There's a lot of people's voices in the back of your head, a lot of people that subconsciously you're wanting to please, right? A lot of us would have succumbed to that pressure of sort of feeling like this moment is bigger than us, so we have to sort of deliver something other than our normal selves. And what made this so special is that Kendrick just went up there and delivered a highly entertaining performance. I'm not saying it wasn't that at all. There were so many amazing visuals, and the choreography and all the different movements and stage setups were incredible. But they were all very much in line with who Kendrick is. He sort of forced us to step into his world rather than him sort of having to step into the world of this platform, this stage, which I think most artists inevitably end up doing, because they feel the gravity of the moment, right? They feel how big this moment is, and they sort of feel like they have to step into this world rather than forcing us to come and meet them where they are. And I think the genius of this, and why I say it was a great Kendrick Lamar performance and not particularly a great Super Bowl performance, was because he said, this is what I do. I'm not going to bend and try and please everybody. You're going to meet me where I am. I don't care what the chatter is going to be as far as, people liking it, not knowing who I am, I mean, even not playing some of his biggest hits, right? Him not doing that was him saying, I'm just giving you my real self, and I'm going to use this platform as a means to not expand my celebrity or try and win over a new audience, but instead to cement, this is the artist I am, this is the man I am, and this is the sort of period on the incredible year that I have had. And I'm good if you don't like it and you don't get it. I'm not here to win anybody over. I'm here to do me. And that was what was amazing about it. And I think that's what has made this a career-defining moment for Kendrick Lamar. And I think what we can all sort of take away from that, there's a lot, right? There's a lot to unpack with that. And I think, this is sort of, when I think back about, my own journey and sort of my shortcomings or difficult moments, or when I even reflect on why I think it's taken so long for me to obtain certain things or to get certain opportunities, obviously there's God's timing, there's the universe's timing, there's so many things that we are not in control of. But there are certain moments where I was in the right room at what could have been the right time, but I didn't show up, the way that I could have. I bent to the will of what the norm was. And as a result, I blended in, right? And when you blend in and you don't showcase why you are special, why would somebody think of you for a extraordinary opportunity, right? If you're not showcasing yourself as somebody who is extraordinary, right? Let's break that word down even deeper. Extraordinary, right? If you're not showcasing yourself as somebody who is above average, why would a above average opportunity come your way, right? Why would you be thought of as somebody who is deserving of or ready for a above average opportunity? And I think that is something I really like. I can't stress this enough. I really try to keep that at like the forefront of my mind as I go about my everyday life, right? And this applies in anything, right? Obviously, I relate to something like this with Kendrick Lamar because I'm in a creative field. I'm an artist, and I even feel weird saying that out loud. But it's the same thing when it comes to dating, right? And feeling like you deserve this great person, right? You have to have that belief in order for you to obtain that person or to have a relationship with them, right? You first must believe that you are worthy of love and worthy of their love and a job, right? You have to feel confident in your ability to do that job in order for you to really excel at it, and in your friendships, feeling like you are somebody who is operating at a high level, that you deserve to be around other people operating at high levels, right? That are inspiring to you, right? All of this, it comes from you finding the confidence and the self-love needed to be able to live authentically, right? And I think that is so much of what holds many of us back, right? Even if it's like, oh, I have this job where I'm like underpaid and I hate my boss and all these different things, but you like never do anything about it, right? You never go and apply for another job. You never ask for a raise. You never address the situation because somewhere in there, it's almost like you don't feel worthy of it, right? Or you are scared that they may not value you, right? And that's you not showing up authentically at that point, right? Because if you know you're capable of more, yet you keep surrounding yourself or keep placing yourself or you stay in situations that are beneath you, that's not you living authentically. That is not you prospering in the way that you were meant to, not shining in the way that you were meant to. And it's like the idea of, big fish, little ponds, right? And sort of how detrimental I think that is to so much of our growth and who we inevitably could become. But it first starts with the idea of walking unapologetically as yourself, right? And I think that's so incredibly inspiring as a takeaway from all of this. And I think sort of piggybacking off of all of that, and apologies if I'm kind of like running around. I'm like, really processing it in the moment as I like to do, as I sort of talk it out here with you. But I also look at it as like, he could have, like I said, gone the route of like, let me just give people what they want. Let me just give them, my biggest hits, but let me just start bringing out random ass people, as a means to appease those who haven't heard of me or who aren't a fan of me. Right? He could have done all of those things. And not to take away from SZA, who I thought was absolutely incredible, and that was such a highlight of a moment. She sounded amazing, and so happy for her to get that shine on that stage. But he could have done the typical thing. He could have, hey, let me bring out Lil Wayne because it's New Orleans. I could have done this whole thing, right? Or attempted to. Obviously, there's complications there. But I think this was sort of, again, when I look at this moment, this particular situation, what is striking and what I take away from it is sort of like the idea that if everybody loves you, you are not showing up authentically for yourself, right? That means that because it's impossible. If every single person in this world, everybody you interact with, everybody just fucking love you and don't have any issues, and they love your art, they love what you say, every word you say, everything, that means that you are literally you're not living authentically, because it's impossible. If you are truly living authentically and giving honest feedback, honest opinions, dressing how you want to dress, there's no way in hell everybody's going to love all of that, right? And I don't mean you have to be fucking hated by the majority of the world, but there are going to be people who just don't get it, who just don't like it. And while that on the surface is like, oh man, that's crazy. The idea of somebody not liking me, right? That sounds horrible. And many of us struggled with that growing up, or even as adults. We still struggle with it, right? Myself included. I even, my like DJ aesthetic, right? And in general in life now, I wear a lot of suits. Like, generally speaking, if I'm out and about at night, I'm wearing a suit these days. And it's always a topic of conversation, good or bad. I got some people who are like, oh man, dude, I love that suit. I love your style and what you're doing. And then I have other people who like, friends who will try to clown on me or make fun of me for it, right? And at times, I'm like, man, when I'm like getting dressed or whatever, I think I've talked about this before. Like, clothing has been a huge way for me to build confidence. But there have been a lot of times where I've been like getting ready to go out, and I'm like, putting on this outfit that I think is cool, but I know is going to like make me stick out like a sore thumb. And I'll second guess it, like, maybe I should just like be more casual today. And I have to remind myself, like, no, this is you showing up authentically. And the fact that people are noticing it and have an opinion means that you are doing something different, right? You are doing something that only you do. And obviously I'm not the only person wearing a suit, but you're doing something that is authentic and unique to you. And that's what this world is supposed to be, right? That's what our lives are supposed to be. We're not supposed to be these robots, these zombies that sort of just go about trying to make everybody happy, which A, is impossible. You make yourself miserable doing so. But B, the more and more you do that, the further and further you get away from what truly makes you, you. And again, Kendrick going the opposite route and saying, I'm going to give you the best Kendrick Lamar performance. I don't care about giving you the best Super Bowl performance. I want to give you the best Kendrick Lamar performance. That right there is somebody who is living as their unapologetic, authentic self and staying true to who they are and being okay with being disliked if it means that some people aren't going to get it or some people aren't going to like it. And we should all be striving to live in that manner, to be so happy with who we are and to be so invested in what we believe in that it doesn't matter the platform, the person, wherever we are, we will show up as our authentic selves. That's what aids us in having, real happiness, and that's what brings true fulfillment in this life. When we recognize all we need and recognize just how special we are. And man, I don't know, just understanding the power that is authenticity. And being unafraid or valuing depth over superficial acceptance. Right? Greatness is real greatness is when you value depth over superficial accolades. That's real artistry, and that's where real fulfillment comes in this life as a human being, is when you value self-love and prioritize who you are and what you believe in over mass appeal and mass acceptance. That's how you win this thing called life. And I think that's what Kendrick did with this performance. Again, he set out to give you a great Kendrick Lamar performance and recognize that is far more important than delivering something that others would debate as if it was or wasn't a great Super Bowl performance. Because a great Super Bowl performance would have been a watered-down Kendrick Lamar performance. And he valued his artistry, who he is as a person, the culture, his community, over appeasing the naysayers or those who had never heard of him. He stood 10 toes down on what matters to him most and what he feels is the highest priority in this world, in this life, and in this country right now. He valued that over trying to please everybody. And that's what made this moment so special. And again, that's fucking goals, man. That's goals. And I want to talk about this, sort of like reiterate some things I've talked about in the past, right? In terms of like the idea of how much you need or how much support you need or whatever to be happy or be successful. So we'll pause here. We'll take a quick break and then we'll be right back. We are back. And I kind of want to just pick up on a couple of things. Like I guess a couple of personal anecdotes that begin to kind of come to mind for me when I think about this battle, this journey that I've had with authenticity. And I want to touch on a couple of things. I want to touch on what happens when you don't show up authentically. And I want to talk about what happens when you do show up authentically. And when I mean don't show up authentically, I want to take it from a vantage point of me at a point in time where the outside world is essentially telling me I'm killing it. But internally, I'm feeling unfulfilled and like something is missing. And I'll kind of talk about like a two-pronged thing. And this is kind of fresh in my mind because I did a podcast interview recently, this last week. And they were asking me some questions about the Breakfast Club. And I've addressed this, on this podcast and stuff a bunch. And sort of talked about, how eventually it just became a very unfulfilling thing. And the only thing that was keeping me there was, I loved everything that came along with being attached to that show and being in proximity to like celebrities and sort of the doors that it opened for me and the rush of all of that, right? But I wasn't doing enough work that truly fulfilled me, right? The work itself didn't fulfill me. And, for me, I find it hard to compartmentalize, right? I find it hard to sort of clock in and clock out, especially when I'm like working in a field that I love, like music and entertainment, it almost becomes incredibly depressing to think that I'm working in a field I love with people who I like, that I'm unhappy, right? And I had to make that hard decision to sort of walk away from it, and knowing, by the way, that my life was going to become far more difficult in terms of the outside validation and in terms of getting opportunities, right? I knew that I would no longer be able to lean on the fact that I was a part of this show, that people would want to be associated with me, right? Or would answer my emails because I was a part of this, or, I was great at like building Instagram relationships because they would check out my Instagram and like see, oh shit, he's with, taking a picture with this person and that person. He's on the Breakfast Club, blah, 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 right? So it made it very easy for me to do a lot of things. And I knew that it meant, okay, this sort of cheat code that I have is going to be gone. But I have to be true to myself and know that I feel like there's so much more I could be doing and should be doing. And that was incredibly difficult. But it led me down a path of far more self-discovery and making far more of the type of impact that I wanted to make. And sort of then after that time period, right, on the surface, I'm having sort of the adult life that was appropriate for somebody in my age at that point, right? So around the time that I had left the Breakfast Club, I was like, I had just closed on my first property, right? I was financially in a good place. I was in my first serious relationship in a very long time. I was like checking all of the adult things, right? And this was, sort of on the heels of the pandemic. So I had stopped DJing during the pandemic, obviously, like everybody else. And even as things opened up, I sort of was telling myself, you're entering a different chapter of your life, essentially, right? You're now in the adult chapter of your life. And this whole DJ thing doesn't really fit in with that adult narrative, right? Time to sort of put that dream to bed, to put that lifestyle to rest, right? It doesn't line up with this adult version of you. And for a while, I felt good, like, hey, I'm checking all the proverbial boxes, right? I'm making a good living. I'm making a real adult salary, for the first time ever, and I'm making all these improvements to my big boy home, right? I'm living by myself. I own the property again. I'm in a serious relationship. I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing at that time period. But as time went on and as I sort of drifted further and further away from music, and I listen, don't get me wrong, I wasn't like I went and became an accountant. No shade to accountants, but it wasn't like I went and just completely left field did something drastically different than what I love. I was doing podcasting. I loved podcasting, right? And I still do. But I was sort of trying to kill off parts of myself almost, right? And I was devaluing these parts of myself. And as a result, I was getting further and further away from my authentic self, right? And the irony, right, from the outside looking in, again, my family or my friends, it was like, oh wow, he's really got like his big boy life together. Especially like, listen, I was a late bloomer in terms of that because I was an artist. It took a long time to become profitable in that, right? It's fortunate that it happened, but I sacrificed everything in order for it to happen, right? I put off being an adult for a long time, essentially, quote unquote adult. And what would eventually begin to happen for me is sort of the unhappiness, the lack of fulfillment was slowly eating away at me on the inside. I was suppressing a huge part of myself, right? And I talk about our passions all the time. I talk about this sort of otherworldly thing that is just like injected in us, from an early age, that for whatever reason we're just drawn to this particular thing, right? Or this area of interest. It just does something for us. And music has been that for me, and I always joke, like, no matter how much I try to walk away from it, it always just fucking, pulls me back in. And I've kind of come to a place where it's like, I don't need to justify it to the outside world. I don't need to make it make sense in terms of like, how does this make sense in society's definition of what it means to be an adult, Like it doesn't have to make sense to anybody but me, essentially, right? And I have to be okay with moving on from people or situations in my life that don't allow for me to truly be me. As good as it feels to sort of check in this case, the adult boxes, I have to be okay with giving up that external validation with the understanding that the internal validation is far more powerful and is what needs to be prioritized. And again, pulling it full circle, when I look at this performance and sort of the two ways he could have gone about it, that to me is sort of, without knowing him or talking to him, that sort of is the decision right there. It's like red pill, blue pill. One pill is you sort of water down your art for the sake of the masses to get the larger external approval. Or the other side of it is you just go 10 toes down into what got you here and who you are and what you believe in and what you stand for, and understand that those who get it will get it, and those who don't are going to unleash a tremendous amount of hate on you. And you have to be okay with that lack of mass external validation because you've prioritized and understand the value of the internal validation you're going to get from just showing up authentically and doing what you personally will be proud of doing and what means the most to you personally. And the beauty of the world that we live in today is you don't need to have the support of 1 million and something people, right? I talk about this a lot. And anybody in my personal life, they like probably are tired of hearing me talk about the idea of like 1,000 true fans, right? I think it's Kevin Kelly wrote a blog post about this, but it's the notion that all you really need is 1,000 true fans to be successful in your craft. If you have 1,000 people who are diehard and buy everything you put out and support you in every way, that's all you need to make a living doing what you love, right? And you can be fulfilled in the fact that you don't have to water it down because you have these diehards, right? And instead of chasing mass acceptance and having to bend at the will of others, essentially. And that is sort of the part that leaves you feeling unfulfilled, is when you keep giving up a part of yourself just to make others happy. I don't know if I'm talking in circles at this point. You kind of get the fucking point of what I'm even talking about today. But, I really, in my heart of hearts, this idea of authenticity is so much bigger than like, your artistry or your brand or like the way you dress or the way you talk. All the authenticity is everything. Because to me, when I talk about living authentically, it's your ability to set boundaries, your ability to tell people how they should or shouldn't treat you, your ability to express what you're feeling. All of that is rooted in your comfort of being authentic. And oftentimes, like, I had a situation recently where I had to kind of check somebody. And in the past, I would have sort of just been like, whatever, do what you're going to do. I would have pretended like I was okay with it, or I kind of would have brushed it off and just been like, whatever. But in the back of my mind, I would have made like a mental note of like, I'm pissed at this person. I'm not going to fuck with them anymore, blah, blah, blah. And that sort of avoidance of confrontation would lead to like a relationship that never would be the same, or maybe unnecessarily rotted away because I didn't just set a boundary and address how I was feeling so that we can sort of move past it, or we could stop the action that would take place that would sort of move us to the place of no return. And as somebody who's living far more authentically now, I addressed it right then and there and let them know how I felt. And, luckily they were receptive to it, and we can now move past it, and we don't have to have this weird tension with that would have been left because of words left unspoken, because I was afraid to be authentically me and express how I was feeling by their actions or their planned actions. And again, that's a small example of like that probably just saved our relationship or helped maintain it. Just me being honest and setting that boundary, i.e. me being authentically me. And that's why this whole, that's why I preach this so heavily, and why I look for opportunities to sort of discuss it or talk about it, is because I just know how powerful and important it is in every aspect of our everyday lives, It's like, imagine like, imagine if every day, 3 meals a day, you had to eat food that you absolutely hated. And you're eating it because you're like, too afraid to tell somebody like, hey, I don't like this food, or you're too afraid to like, switch up your routine and stop at a place you actually like rather than just stopping at the same place you've been stopping at for years or whatever, right? Imagine like, as stupid and silly as that sounds, just imagine how miserable you would be if every fucking meal sucked. Right? And it could have easily been changed, but like it's a result of you just not doing the little things needed to help ensure and give yourself the best chance of having an enjoyable meal, And that's basically what we're doing every time we sort of don't take advantage of an opportunity to show up authentically, or we choose to make other people comfortable, or we choose to do what's easy or convenient rather than doing what truly, is what we want, essentially. And unlike, the food thing, it would be pretty detrimental. I love food. But in the grand scheme of it all, it's probably not that huge of a deal, right? As long as you're getting the nutrients you need. But in our everyday lives, this affects our level of happiness and fulfillment, which then affects how we show up in this world, which affects the opportunities that we get. It affects our entire quality of life. I really do think much of our quality of life is predicated on how much we are showing up, how much or how little we're showing up as our authentic self. I truly do believe that. And I thought this was like a powerful sort of moment to showcase. And as like just a little caveat, anybody following the beef and with Drake and Kendrick and things like that, outside looking in, I don't know these people, but when I see Drake, and I'm a fan, to me it's somebody who is like, we don't know who he is. And I think and as a result, to me it's somebody who is trying to seek out that mass approval. He's still trying to make everybody love him, right? And I think when we look at this like beef and the results of it, what bothers him the most is how much people seem to not approve of him, right? Or dislike him. And so much of his career as an artist and musically and bending and twisting and like the way he looks and talks and all these different things, it's like somebody who is relying so much on that mass appeal, that gigantic sort of like, notoriety. It's like somebody just chasing the love of other people. And yeah, he's given us some bangers and stuff that we all play. And quite frankly, most people listen to Drake more than they listen to Kendrick. Or as a DJ, you play more Drake than you do Kendrick. But I think internally, and you could see it in some of his actions, it's somebody who is like, man, why can't I get y'all's respect, right? Like, as like the hip hop community, the hardcore hip hop heads don't respect him. And you could see that it's still, that hurts him. And that's like the greatest takeaway from this whole thing is like he wants to get the respect that Kendrick gets. But Kendrick gets that respect because he has decided to go a different route. And again, it's, different things for different people. But Kendrick's route has been far more predicated on authentically sort of staying true to who he is and what he believes in rather than chasing the next trend or chasing what's hot. And the ironic part about it, as I sort of teased the idea of what happens when you show up authentically, the ironic part about it is you end up finding community and acceptance when you start walking that authentic path. And maybe it's not from the masses, but it feels far more fulfilling because it's from people who see you, truly see you, and embrace you. Right? And that's what, like, this podcast. There's a lot of Latinos that still don't agree with me or believe I'm lesser than or whatever it might be. But within this journey of life as a gringo, I've found other people who relate in some sort of way, Latinos or non-Latinos, and I've found my place, and I'm far more fulfilled and far more comfortable in my own skin as a result. And again, it's not the masses telling me that they love me, but it is the ability to find that acceptance via my authentic self that is delivering a level of fulfillment that I never had before, or a level of confidence in myself that I never had before, or a level of comfortability in my own skin that I've never had before. And of course, it's an ongoing journey. But if I think about myself, 4 years ago to where I am now, it's crazy to sort of see the way that I am moving, where I'm far more okay with people not liking me or disagreeing with me, if it means that I'm going to be able to be far more, convicted in the things that I say and things that I do, or have far more conviction in the things that I say and do. Right? That's providing me with a level of real fulfillment and happiness, regardless if it's, by the largest audience humanly possible. And it's why I feel confident now showing up in rooms and taking up space, and why I feel confident, dressing a certain way that, others might not like, but it feels good to me. And it's why I've gotten certain opportunities, is because I'm showing up differently than most, because I'm just showing up as me, and nobody can do me the way that I do me, right? And that's the beauty of all of this. So my mind is all over the place right now. I'm really hyped on like this guy. I'm going to pause here. Let me pause my brain for a second. I'm very hyped in general, but I feel very energized by that conversation. Like, I needed to hear that. I hope you did too. Like, I needed to hear that for a second as just this reminder, keep doing what you're doing. With that said, let's tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment called Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
All right, so obviously I'm ready to run through a fucking wall right now. I'm feeling really energized and pumped up after all we're talking about. So, and I think, again, that's the beauty of it. It's that you look at these moments, the power of it when you reflect on sort of what somebody like Kendrick just did. It's, sort of proof that you can show up as who you are and stay true to what you believe in and fight for the causes that you believe in and still be given massive opportunities. And when you do get those opportunities, it's crucial to not give in to the wounded voice in your head that is searching for mass approval, but to sort of remain true to the ideas and the fundamentals and the person that got you said opportunity, right? And stay true to that person. And as long as you do that, I think you can always sort of find comfort in however life sort of plays itself out, that as long as you know you did what's best for you, the human being first, and what is authentically on brand for you and the life that you want to live, I think there's a comfort in that and a fulfillment in that for sure. So yeah, I hope that was comforting or energizing for people listening. With that said, thank y'all so much for tuning in. I'll catch you on Thursday for our Thursday Trends episode. Till then, stay safe and we shall talk soon. Peace.